Okay, I get paid, whether you subscribe or not. When you have a certain amount of views and you know what I mean? What I'm saying is, by you leaving, you're not hurting me. You're just revealing to yourself and to me that you can't handle conflict in your life.
I feel like I can be the sound of this generation. The voice, I mean, it's this generation. I need food. We're at a point where people are insecure about just existing because of all this weird guilt. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, I love being me. I can go on all night about this. I am just on a completely different wavelength. People took to their keyboards in 2020. If you're not vaccinated, don't hang out with me. The only person I want to be woke to is Jesus. Because no offense, I mean this kindly, none of you guys matter at the end of the day when it comes to like the judgment.
Salutations and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kidology and I make videos about everything and anything to do with modern society. And today we are talking about a particular individual who I think is an integral part of modern society and a very integral thing that happened in modern society, namely the panini. Now, because YouTube has been censoring all of my videos, age restricting all of my videos, all of that yada yada yada, all that boring stuff, I'm going to be using a lot of euphemisms, and this is going to be a very kosher, family-friendly video. So be warned. Apologies, blessings and riches. Thank you for understanding. Do any of you remember, or do any of you know Kelly Stamps? Of course you do, because I think probably everybody who has been on the internet for at least 4 years and has stumbled across vlogging content or stumbled across a video about how to start a YouTube channel inevitably at least knows this face, this very important, very interesting, fascinating face. And that is the individual whom we are going to be doing a video on today. A deep dive into not just and importantly Kelly Stamps, but I would say even more importantly, what has happened to Kelly Stamps? Because I think this is just a very interesting discussion about the life of an influencer and also the woes of an influencer, and especially an influencer who is, as I said, as exceptional as Kelly Stamps. As will perhaps become clear, Kelly Stamps is exceptional. And you know what else is pretty exceptional? Your personal information, and importantly, keeping it safe. And that is where fortuitously the sponsor of today's video comes in. You know, there's been a lot of breaking news at the moment, but one story that has truly shocked me has been learning about the recent AT&T data breach. Over 73 million customer records were leaked on the dark web. And by customer records, I mean social security numbers and passcodes that nobody wants out there. And brethren, I've had to interrupt you from the future to tell you that this catastrophic problem of your sensitive information and data being breached has not subsided. No, it has not been solved. And no, companies are not doing better. Just a few months ago, National Public Data announced that a recent breach means that the social security numbers of every American has potentially been stolen. Every single American. And it's also been confirmed that these hackers have released this information online for free. What is happening? What the And that is why I personally use Oreo, the very kind sponsor of today's video. Although the likes of AT&T recommend the use of strong passwords, the frequent monitoring of account activity, and the use of fraud alerts, this is not only a hell of a lot to do, but very difficult to effectively and repeatedly remember. And if AT&T can't even keep information safe and secure, how on earth can an absolute Luddite like myself do it right? And that, brethren, is where Oreo comes in, doing all of this completely and reliably for you. Oreo shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. With military-grade encryption, Oreo blocks malicious sites and shows me which data brokers are selling my information. Oreo's ability to monitor the dark web for any and all of my information is unmatched, especially when it comes to preventing the kind of identity theft that the AT&T data breach will regrettably unleash. Oreo makes me aware of who is trying to sell my data and automatically opts me out on my behalf. And the best bit is, I do not have to worry about a thing. And my spam is reduced in the process of Oreo protecting my personal and online information. I don't have to download a whole bunch of different apps just because companies can't keep my data secure. And if my personal information is ever compromised, I don't have to worry about a thing with Oreo. It is constantly activated and doing the very hard work of keeping me safe and secure on the internet. And as somebody who works entirely online, I value my privacy more than most, and I value yours too. You can use my special link, oreo.com/Kidology, to start your 2-week free trial. My link is showing on screen right now and linked down in my description box. Thank you so much to Oreo for sponsoring today's video and for keeping my personal information secure and uncompromised. And now let's transition from one crucial event to another, the Panini era of Kelly Stamps. Who is Kelly Stamps? Now, Kelly Stamps is a very exceptional internet personality. Emphasis really on the exceptional. She is known for doing perhaps something that nobody else has ever done on such a magnitude before. Kelly amassed over 600,000 subscribers in under a year without anything but her infamous spatula and deadpan delivery of snappy advice through vlogging her life as a 20-something-year-old trying to find herself largely in New York City. Now, this is pretty exceptional to say the least. Most channels of that size have editors, they have script writers, they have people behind the scenes, management teams, working tirelessly behind curating their image and brand. And considering that she was a one-woman show, she was bringing in numbers that literally everybody was just envious of. I do think that because of all this one-woman success, Kelly's self-assurance and self-confidence can come off as a bit much. But we'll get back to this point. Now, Kelly built a very strong parasocial relationship through her Stampede University branding. And this branding fed very well into this idea of her as a professor teaching her students through her advice videos and her vlogs. I would say that this curation of a professor teaching their university students curated this very important and interesting image of students at an exclusive university or being members of an exclusive university that they were sort of a part of, a sort of club ambiance to it, which was very successful. And I think even to this day is quite successful for other channels that do the same kind of thing. I'm sure you've heard of channels, there's at least 2 channels that I know of who have petty merch and have this idea of a petty university, which is very successful and really does sell very well. I would say that the Stampede University was at its most successful when A, Kelly was living in New York City, B, she was single and relaying her dating stories and advice to her viewers, and C, living the aesthetic life of a 20-something-year-old trying to find herself, moving around and to some extent struggling with mental health, with men, and with finding her purpose. In short, and importantly, her branding became very relatable and aspirational to the liberal and left-leaning cosmopolitan who either lived in New York or idolized it. Kelly's life was quite literally a movie, and Kelly was very successful at bridging the gap between her growing success and potentially no longer being relatable, at least at her peak. Now, how was Kelly able to bridge this seemingly unbridgeable gap? Now, the gap was bridged, I think, by Kelly's most successful videos and their underlying ethos. I, that is Kelly Stamps, started a YouTube channel and it's given me freedom. It's made me rich beyond my wildest dreams. And importantly, you, yes, you, sitting back there in the back of Stampede University, need to start a YouTube channel too, because it'll give you freedom and it'll make you rich. Basically, Kelly's success was something to celebrate, not just for her, but importantly for you, as evidence that you could be just as successful, just as big, just as unbothered, and just as financially secure as she was. Now, one important thing about Kelly Stamps is that you couldn't really bracket her content in anywhere, which therefore made it virtually impossible for anybody to copy her style of content, and as such made what she was doing very much mesmerizing. I think the closest comparison you could perhaps make is calling her the Panini era Emma Chamberlain. Basically, she was the it girl that everybody wanted to be, and I mean that quite literally. The number of what I would call tribute videos that have been made, either with Kelly Stamps' name in the title or directly called Kelly Stamps Changed My Life, or referencing or trying to reenact her quirkiness, really do litter the internet. It was huge at the time to make videos with Kelly Stamps in the title. And there was this whole drama with this YouTuber called Jenna Brown who made quite a few videos about Kelly Stamps, and in one of them even tried to transform herself physically into Kelly Stamps. And then she made a video basically saying that she was jealous of Kelly Stamps and had to unfollow her. And it turned into this whole very weird sort of parasocial relationship and drama, which again, we will get into the very peculiar parasociality of Kelly Stamps and her audience that is integral to this whole saga and story. She deleted her channel after this whole drama. I hope that she's okay and doing well in life. But yes, it was a very strange era in the Kelly Stamps lore, shall we say. All of that is really just to say that Kelly's following were pretty devout. And I would know, because the first video that blew up on my channel had a reference to Kelly Stamps and the I Don't Dream of Labor sort of trend that was happening during the panini. And the first few comments that I got, and I got many more comments like it, of people telling me to keep Kelly Stamps' name out of my mouth. Very, very devout following indeed. Yeah, people were pretty much willing to land on swords for her. Now, the time of Kelly Stamps' blow up is crucial because it was during the panini era, and I will be getting back to this. Her motto was essentially to get rich, to go to Italy, to eat tiramisu, to buy Chanel, and to not take bullshit from anybody, especially when dating and trying to achieve your personal goals. It was called by Kelly, by her followers, by the Stampeders, by news outlets, Kelly's total domination of YouTube. And as I said, her followers were called the Stampede. They attended Stampede University. She would lecture to them in her advice videos, and that is the important thing, the advice videos. Now, these advice videos are important because they offered her aspirational and awe-inspired subscribers who were homebound during the panini something to not just look forward to, but importantly, something profitable to potentially do with their time. Starting a YouTube channel and making a lot of money from it, and importantly, having somebody like Kelly who was evidence that you could make a lot of money from it, was indicative. And of course, as we all know about the panini, the mood, I think, just around everything, around life, around our priorities, and especially reevaluating those priorities, was very different. I would say that importantly, it was very individualistic. Everything was very individualized. People weren't being influenced by their groups, by their tribes. Everybody really had to stand on their own 2 feet and think for themselves. And I think what happens when a lot of people think for themselves is that they become quite, I think, self-interested, and I think far more, as I said, just individualistic, and things like making a lot of money become more important to you as an individual than would otherwise be the case. And as I said, Kelly Stamps was evidence that this panini era formula actually worked. Now, one of the crucial reasons why she was so popular during the panini is because she transformed her income from 52 cents into $40,000 per month in under a year.
Sponsors pay on average people with my channel size anywhere between like $3,000 to $10,000. If you do the math, I'm making over $15,000 like minimum lately, which is just like my brain cannot compute. It's like what I
cannot say this or stress this enough. How do you change your $40,000 a month? Wow, just wow. And sorry, in under a year. Incredible. Just hats off, or in my case, wig off, really. Wow. Basically, it was impressive. And people loved how transparent Kelly was about her income.
Channel where I'm very transparent. I am getting paid roughly anywhere between low end $10,000 for an ad, as high as my highest one has been 6 figures so far, which is insane. I can't even believe it still. I'm like, what? Why? Okay, don't ask questions. They might ask for the money back. Oh, that's my money. Do not be scared to actually quit your job and pursue this.
And on top of that, people especially loved the message that went behind these numbers.
People romanticize New York City. That's a way how I got popular in the beginning. People romanticize the idea of being a YouTuber. I'm riding that wave right now because I'm selling a realistic dream, which is that I changed my life with YouTube, and you literally can too if you have what it takes.
Kelly was selling, as she put it, a realistic dream. And I definitely think that she believed that she was, at least for a few years. Now, every story has a plot, and the plot of Kelly Stamps is interesting. Objectively speaking, and this is no shade or anything at all, this is just objective facts, Kelly Stamps' numbers have gone down considerably on her main channel. And this video is going to be a deep dive into why perhaps that is. A lot has changed when it comes to the branding and the individual that is Kelly Stamps. And this was really an intriguing and interesting, unexpected little investigation, if I do say so myself. How did Kelly Stamps go from the it girl of YouTube that everybody wanted to be, earning 6 figures and having people literally transform themselves into her, to regretting going viral, leaving her old audience and starting a new, much smaller and relatively controversial channel. Kelly has a great sense of belief in herself.
Before I'm 30, I need to have at least $2 million saved. That is totally doable.
And this is integral to answering the question, what happened to Kelly Stamps?
But I literally started preaching the word Jesus on YouTube, and then people left. And I will not say the word, I lost subscribers when I started, preaching Jesus. I don't like the word lost. Lost implies I've lost something that I needed. I lost something that I want back. In fact, I told people, if you hate me because you ain't me, leave. Like, no offense, I don't need you.
Now, this is a difficult one, but also I think quite a straightforward one, because yes, she very likely has been shadow banned just because of how shady the goings on and the policies of companies like Meta and Google are when it comes to their social media platforms. Also, Kelly herself acknowledges that the YouTube algorithm is an unknowable entity.
There's a lot of people who want this life that I have, but they don't really want to put in the work for it. It's a lot more work than it looks, and that's the harsh truth. You have to really want to work for it. Influencing, being an influencer, is an easy job, but maintaining it long term and paying your bills and paying your rent is so difficult. The algorithm is kind of unpredictable. Miss Girl, I'm over her. She's hot, she's cold, she's yes, and she's no. You in your luxury apartment, then you out on the float. You have to be good. You have to be sharp and smart, like I am, because I have a method to my madness.
And yet, this is difficult because I do not think that this is the only reason why her channel has gone relatively quiet for its size. Firstly, I think the panini and what it represented is important to consider here. Personal development content was all the rage during the panini, and Kelly Stamps was central to this hype. As a result, she blew up like nobody else before her, or in my personal opinion, has done ever since. Add to that the comedic genius of her general personality, and you have quite a unique content creator. She was offering the information and advice that people stuck at home wanted, as well as comedic relief. Now, I also think the panini offered Kelly Stamps a lot of protection from what is called audience capture. Because everybody was at home, I think everybody valued authenticity and uniqueness a lot more. And this valuing of authenticity and uniqueness contrasted greatly with everything that we knew and know when it comes to our direct partaking in society and in communities, especially when it comes to things like community allegiance and the shame that comes with not conforming to your community, to that allegiance or to that identity group. Thus, when the panini ended, we went back to our social norms and mores. We went back to our communities and our groups. And I've definitely noticed that since the end of the panini, the precarity of self-identification, of finding yourself, and of not wasting your life away is definitely not as big a priority as it was during the panini. During the panini, making a lot of money, being materialistic, and being unashamedly yourself was awe-inspiring and applauded. After the panini, people realized that it wasn't the end of the world. I think that things definitely went back to normal. And I think this very much fits the trope of this is what dreams are made of and living for your dreams and everything. And that was very much the sentiment during the panini, and then inevitably bills and taxes hit, Secondly, what I would call the Cathrin Manning effect most definitely applies to Kelly Stamps as well. Now, Cathrin Manning is a content creator whose growth and dip pretty much mirrors Kelly Stamps exactly. Like Kelly, Cathrin's most popular videos are about how to start a YouTube channel and how to grow on YouTube, and especially about how much money she made as a YouTuber. And just like Kelly, Cathrin's most popular videos and virality came during the panini. As I said, this content about how to become a YouTuber, and importantly, how to become a very, very rich one, were all the rage and were very, very popular. Now, come the end of the panini and the return to normal life, Cathrin's Cathrin's content evolved as she inevitably did herself. I think as the views dropped and inevitably as she just changed her priorities, she shifted over to vlogging, to detailing her house renovations, and at least recently to the struggles that she has had with finding her content and her niche. It has clearly been a journey, a very vulnerable and honest journey for Cathrin. And what is noteworthy and evident is that the majority of her audience haven't stuck around for it. Why? Because they were there during the panini. They were there for everything that the panini represented. And because of the very popular and particular kind of self-development content that was revenue candy at the time.
I'm at the point now where this is the first year in the past several years that I don't have any sponsorships lined up. I have got zero guaranteed income for this year. And that scares the absolute shit out of me. And I need to figure out what the f I'm doing. I need to become an expert in some niche, and I really need to hone in on my brand. I need to start treating myself like I'm at the level that I'm at, because I'm not new to this game. This is my 8th fucking year doing this.
This, in my opinion, very much underpins Kelly Stamp's story. Now, I think to her detriment, Kelly has been a little too open about the fact that as an influencer who makes the kind of vlog content that she does, that the financial reward which she gets out of it is disproportionate to the amount of work and hours that she puts in. She recently stated that as an influencer who does the content that she does on her main channel as well as on her second channel now, that she puts in roughly 15 hours of work a week.
I naturally started doing YouTube full time, but guys, it's not a full-time job for me. For my type of channel, with what I do, it takes me about 15 hours a week to produce what I do. I produce a video once or sometimes twice a week, once a week on my new channel for sure. That does take time. But on this channel like this, I'm just sitting down, I'm in my pajamas. I just said, how do I make a mermaid tail? I don't have time to buy one on Amazon. So I just got my bath towel that happens to be green, sage green. And I got like some shiny corset I never wear that I can't breathe in. And I'm like, let me just act like a little mermaid. That didn't take time. These are things I already have on hand. So anyway, my spur of the moment style of content making is very easy to produce, it's very easy to edit, and it's very easy to post. I have so much time in the week.
Now, during the panini, putting 15 hours of work into your channel, that is into your business per week, was, I think, for most people, not only aspirational, but importantly, understandable, given everything that I've detailed. However, things have changed and subsequently gone back to normal. During times of normalcy, if you're going to put 15 hours of work into your channel, into your business per week, to some extent, you're going to reap what you sow. Even if the only thing that you are reaping is views, because according to Kelly, at least, she's still making bank. I think that during the panini, the novelty and romance of people sitting at home themselves, seeing somebody else sitting at home working and not dreaming of labor, whilst simultaneously making 40,000 US dollars per month, was aspirational. It was a dream come true. However, those same people are now back at work, working their 9-to-5s and some. Now, maybe it's just me, and I do not mean for this to come across in any ill-spirited way, but hearing that Kelly works so little, yet makes upwards of 40K per month, and at a point was making 6 figures a year, that just doesn't hit the same now as I think it did to many during the panini. And I think it really doesn't hit the same when most of her audience are probably now under the realization that they are not going to become 6-figure earning social media influencers. Also, and I think this is very, very important to note, Kelly is very much under the impression that she deserves everything that she's achieved, that she hasn't ever been dependent on an audience, that this is entirely of her making. This comes across quite strongly in all the interviews and the podcasts that I've listened to her that she's been on, etc.
I get paid, okay? I get paid, whether you subscribe or not. When you have a certain amount of views and you know what I mean? What I'm saying is, by you leaving, you're not hurting me. You're just revealing to yourself and to me that you can't handle conflict in your life.
We're at a point where people are insecure about just existing because of all this weird guilt. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, I love being me. I can go on all night about this. I am just on a completely different wavelength. The only person I want to be woke to is Jesus. Because no offense, I mean this kindly, none of you guys matter at the end of the day. when it comes to like the judgment.
Now, even if she is correct about this, and I'm not saying that she's right or that she's wrong, anything like that, but if she is correct, I really do not think that this comes across at all well, based on how influenced relationships currently are seen and viewed and are regulated, or more so unregulated. I don't know, for me, it oftentimes, just listening to Kelly, comes across as a little bit arrogant and somewhat, I think, a bit maybe deluded is a strong word for it, but I would definitely say that it does come across as a bit arrogant and also somewhat, I would say, resentful of her lower viewership and of the shadow ban, which is of course perfectly human and perfectly understandable, but I'm just looking at this sort of analytically, not judgmentally. And I do think that this attitude shift on the part of Kelly comes from a viable place. She's definitely a part of the kind of crowd on the internet that talk a lot about not being nice anymore and not being people pleasers anymore. And I do think that there is a good message in a lot of that for a lot of people. And I do importantly also think that this attitude shift that is quite noticeable in the content of Kelly's does come from something that I think is not spoken about a lot, and that is very negative when it comes to the parasocial relationships that audiences have with influencers. And I think the very negative mental health consequences for influencers when it comes to, as I referenced briefly, audience capture and the expectations of audiences. Parasociality. Now, this may be a touchy one for some, just because some audience members don't really like it when content creators or influencers talk about parasociality, and especially talk about it as if the audience is accountable or responsible for it. But I really think that the Kelly Stamp situation demonstrates the harms of this sort of very common no audience accountability regarding parasociality. Kelly realized that particular segments of her audience didn't actually respect her as a human being and saw her more so as a product of their own making and serving. And if you watch her content, and especially her story times about her encounters with fans, this is quite viable. Kelly often relayed common instances of being approached by fans out in the wild in rather inappropriate and invasive ways.
So then someone else comes up again an hour later. Same thing. Yo, we were talking in the kitchen. I guess you're like some YouTuber. This guy just talking to me like this. Like, yo, I guess you're some YouTuber. I'm at a fine dining restaurant. This dude is at a stance like we're talking at the gas station. And that's when I realized people don't respect me because I allowed the people pleasing. But in this case, they don't know who I am. They actually don't know anything. They were just gossiping in the kitchen. I guess there's a big YouTuber here sitting down at a table by herself. Let's go bug her. Now, I can't change what they did there, but you can change how people treat you from that point forward. I told him, get away from my table, please. He just left. That's it. They never bothered me again. I've been back to that place 3 times. Nothing ever happened. So that's, can you imagine dealing with this like at least twice a week ever since, my channel kind of got really well known.
And as a result, Kelly stopped being nice, both in the real world and online.
I want you guys to know this. It's okay to know that other people are not on your level. And I'm not talking about like, attraction or money or anything like that. I mean, in the world, the animal food chain. This is gonna sound so, forgive me, this is not supposed to be like Andrew Tate at all. Basically, this girl is trying to size me up, okay? Insecure people, just like when you're dating, insecure men, I'm looking at the battery, will try to either bring you down to their level or crush you to make you question your worth so that they can, get with you down here because they can't meet you up here, right? Without all the details, just know that I'm right. I'm telling you, like, short version of the story.
And a great deal of the shift in her mindset around this came from her stay in Connecticut.
Living in Connecticut was my wake-up call. I had to act like those elite, kind of snippy people in order to get what I needed, which was privacy and just decent level service anywhere. I learned how to be firm with people. I don't see things with a smile. I certainly don't say the word sorry a million times. I used to be like, oh, sorry, excuse me. When people walk towards me, I mean, not everybody, I don't just like hit people, but there are people, it's a certain group of people who don't move when we walk. And I start knocking them over. I'm like, we're playing Wii, sports resort, bowling. Like, I just knock them right over. And they look at me like, why didn't you move for me? They assumed I'm gonna move for them. So I stopped moving and I hit people.
And I know why they're not moving.
And I'd say that a great deal of this confidence in herself really began to translate itself into her content. She became a lot more self-confident, a lot more self-assured, a lot less of a people pleaser, and a lot more willing to call out inappropriate behavior and encounters with people. She's really one of the few influencers that I see directly engaging with what is called light stalking, and especially how it impacts influencers and content creators who are oftentimes, I would say, scared to address this or to speak out about this because of the, I would say, pretty inevitable sometimes backlash that you get from this because of this perception that as a content creator, you have the power, if not all the power. A caption on her video about the truth of her mental health as an influencer reads, "Nearly all the influencers I talk to feel stuck and tired of light stalking, but we don't mention it because we don't want to offend the respectful audience members." The parasociality and its negatives were clearly becoming an issue for Kelly and forced her to move on several occasions.
Straight up ran from somebody recently, and I had no shame about it. 2 years ago, I would feel bad and be like, oh, I feel like I have to, make them feel comfortable. Whoever thinks to make me feel comfortable? Very few people when they come up to me. So I finally started putting myself first. So again, going back to this article, a few influencers mentioned how they left large cities, how they left, that environment that I'm referring to, the it girl thing. I was the New York City it girl for a minute. I was that, quirky, relatable, quirky black girl who's like killing it in the city. So I did what I had to do, which I'm still figuring out right now. But I immediately was like, I can't even be in my home in Connecticut. I can't even be there because the temptation is right there.
And therefore, Kelly set new boundaries between herself and her audience. These new boundaries were reflected in Kelly starting her second channel as a response to feeling disconnected from an audience who really didn't know her, or from her perspective, didn't humanize her.
You're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
You're getting a lot of views. And you've decided, hey, that main channel that you now have over 700,000 subscribers, you don't care about it anymore. What are you going to do next?
Yeah. I kind of recruited the original crowd from the Kelly Stamps channel, and I said, go to Senpai Stamps. Originally, it was
Your second channel.
Queen. Yes. Whataburger Queen. I just needed a channel on the spot one night when I was just feeling inspired. You know what? Who cares? Like, I started this channel from scratch 5 years ago. I can do the same thing all over again. Just like anybody can go back to school at any age. And if you just want to change your life, do something about it. I wanted to feel what I felt with my original audience when I was at home. They're rooting for me genuinely, and they can relate, but in a way that's realistic. Because when you blow up, and I think when you're a woman particularly, people are kind of waiting for you to screw up because it's like this weird internal thing. I don't know. It's hard to explain until you see it in the numbers. Like, I don't want to promote the idea of my life is better. I mean, it is. Let's be real. It is. I'm comfortable. I don't have to worry about a lot of things, but that doesn't mean anything. I'd rather have a strong core audience again who I can go up to on the street and feel comfortable talking to.
And I'd say that a good instance of this perceived dehumanization stems from the fact that Kelly is a black woman and, importantly, doesn't fit very neatly into stereotypes or assumptions of what being black is meant to be, especially in her context as a black African-American woman. And this therefore leads us to what can be dubbed the Black Square incidents.
I was at this tavern and just talking to this lady, and she's like, what happened? She said that she got like bullied and ostracized at work because she wouldn't post her black square. And the same thing, the same thing happened to me. And I'm, by the way, when I started this channel, and I still have this mentality, this is just a place for me to upload videos. I can't honestly tell you that I am your role model. I cannot tell you that I am a politician, a political commentator, a preacher. I am not a teacher either necessarily. I joke about that, but I'm just having fun. I can stop at any time. I can close my YouTube channel, move to Japan, and become a J-pop star. There is no obligation on my part, is my point. But during this time period, like this woman and like many other people who are just existing peacefully in their jobs, for some reason there's this expectation like, you're supposed to be a spokesperson on everyone else's pain. You're supposed to be speaking on everyone else's behalf. I'm like, no. Here's the way that I view the world. And many people don't like this because they're threatened by beautiful particularly women, beautiful, let's get even deeper, Black women who think for themselves. Okay, I vote for myself. I think for myself. I do try to help everybody, but at the same time, you can't project your pain onto me. Your insecurities are not my insecurities. I can't go out of my way to do that for others, because at the end of the day, you know, this channel is called Kelly Stamps. Well, this one's not, but my other channel is called Kelly Stamps. I'm Kelly Stamps. I am not you. So I'm gonna have different views. And I could have sworn like 10 years ago, you could have your own views and it's fine. Like I had friends who were so crazy, like right wing. And then this other friend over here is like super left wing. And I'm just sitting here in the middle, like, I love you both, let's hang out. We all got along. But again, stuff happened. People took to their keyboards in 2020. If you're not vaccinated, don't hang out with me.
There's a prevalent belief on social media that influencers have to talk about current affairs and the politics of the day, but importantly, that they have to talk about it from the right side of history. Whatever that means, it really does pertain to you at this point during our current culture wars. To not speak on such things is immediately deemed privileged. An example of somebody seemingly more privileged than most, not using their reach and their influence to do good and to do better. I don't know. Apparently, influencers can virtually alleviate the suffering of others. I think we know where I stand on this issue. In the case of Kelly Stamps, the most noteworthy example of this was when she was called out for not having a black square on her social medias back in 2020, because she is, as you can see, a black woman. And this wasn't anything new and is most definitely nothing new when it comes to being a black woman on the internet who is perceived as countercultural.
I could have stayed a victim. I could have, like my old friends, I'm so sorry that you guys had to put up with this, but I was venting to them every day. I was just so stuck in this mindset of, well, okay, I can be a victim, I can be a victor. It's very simple, but it's not that simple, which again is why I'm like, I would love to just promote this and try to convince you all that, you know, there's better out there and I want to do the right thing. Like, you know, the pastor said in my Bible study, how to know if you're being a good Christian: read the word, preach the word, suffer well, you know, and like live by the word. I would love to preach, but it honestly takes away my energy.
I've definitely noticed that black men are allowed to they're allowed to express their more controversial opinions and are respected by many for it. Whereas black women, definitely not as much leeway. Kelly, being a darker skinned black woman who enjoys the soft life, has most definitely gotten her negative attention from forums like Reddit and Lipstick Alley. Now, I think something that a lot of Kelly's audience were quite surprised at discovering, especially with her life revolving around cosmopolitan, liberal New York life and aesthetics, as well as being an independent woman very much experiencing modern problems, was that she is Christian. I'm not sure what denomination she is precisely, just because she moves around quite a bit and hasn't really elaborated, at least as far as I can see. But I do know that very recently she's been looking more seriously into Catholicism and into more orthodox sort of traditions and interpretations of scripture. I just want to make it clear from my stance that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being religious. In fact, the vast majority of the world is religious and is quite, as a result, socially conservative. Yet, in our modern day culture wars, religious affiliation inevitably puts one under either assumptions or under pressure to dispel those assumptions. For instance, in the last 20 years or so, many Protestant churches in the West have gone through what can be called a rebrand in order to address declining levels of faith among Westerners, particularly among young people. Even the Catholic Church, under the stewardship of Pope Francis, has begun to, at times, very meticulously curate its image in relation to a modern and more progressive world order. Now, how does this relate to Kelly Stamps? Kelly Stamps' content consumption is indicative of somebody who is more right-leaning and anti-woke, something that is an evident shift from her former content and branding.
Also, people love to insinuate, you know, people like myself, Zaria Simmons, Amalek Panobi, Amir Odom, who I talk to a lot now. People love to say, oh, something's wrong with you all. You all just probably have self-hate. You just hate black people because you're stepping forward saying stuff like this. No, it's because we care, and it's because a lot of us want to have kids, and I'm concerned. right? I'm already concerned.
And also, in response to a lot of the modern church's rebranding, she is most definitely against it if we go by not just the titles, but also the content of these video titles. Kelly has also been a lot more open about her disregard for what she perceives as the current regressive black culture, that is the culture of the day, relative to the elegance of black culture past.
Back in the day, black people were held with such, regard. There were two-parent households. 60s and 50s are rough. We're not glossing over the ugliness of the past as well. But I'm just saying, there was this dignified presence. When I think about black culture, like we're gonna do like a word association game. I think about Huxtables, Claire Huxtable, Bill Cosby Show, Tia and Tamara, Sister. That very specific smell of the blue grease that you put in your hair in the morning. The hot comb, Easter outfits. I just thought about an actress. I just said Viola Davis. Jodie Turner-Smith, elegance, cocoa butter. I don't know. I could think of so many positive things.
I do feel that the examples given are very much lacking in substance. I can find just as many modern day examples of black culture which fit the definition of elegance. But go off. Now, in 2020, during this whole debacle and controversy around the Black Square, Kelly's father regrettably and sadly passed away. And I think that, at least my impression, is that this really influenced and impacted her and was quite eye-opening for her as an influencer. I think that whilst this very personal thing was happening to her, she was being bombarded and accused of not being a good enough person because she wasn't being political enough. This is a good example of why I personally hate this idea, this very modern idea that the personal is political, because of how time and again it necessarily has to dehumanize and dismiss the personal in order to uplift the political. Kelly Stump's loss is a very good example of this. Whilst Kelly was dealing with her father's sudden and unexpected passing, that is the personal,
I'm not happy right now. I'm happy. I'm just very, because my dad passed away and I already knew it was coming. That's not, why I'm sad. There's other stuff going on too.
She was being pressured and criticized online about not speaking out on the events which spawned BLM because she was a black woman, the political.
During this already horrible time, which I'm still dealing with, grieving, right? And I'm living in the smack dab middle of Manhattan. I got people telling me, why aren't you using your voice to speak about these issues? Why aren't you using this? I'm like, do you think I'm concerned about that right now? Okay, mind you, there's this noise, right? And then there's this noise of, oh my goodness, this just happened to me. My life has forever changed. I have to learn how to live without my dad in it.
Now, having seen some of this go down back in 2020 and also just reflecting and reviewing it now, I do find the insensitivity of all of it quite telling, especially because Kelly was very open about her father's passing and about everything that she was going through. I think for some, Kelly's skin color really meant that her personal experiences could be reduced to assumptions surrounding her skin color, that she was one of them by dint of being black.
I felt uncomfortable with the amount of people who have made me uncomfortable in public. The amount of sad things I would just happen. Like, I was at the airport, San Diego. I landed there one day, and this girl comes up to me, and she's like, oh my gosh, Kelly Stamps. I said, hey girl, we're talking. And she's relatable to me because she looks like she's in her 20s.
Yeah.
She got something going on. She's like black or something. I don't know. She's spicy. And she's just like, girl, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, I hate living here. I'm like, oh, how? It's the most beautiful city in the world. How do you hate San Diego? She goes, as a black woman, well, you get it. I'm like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And I got what she was saying because I'm so relatable at that point growing up. She basically was projecting how hard it is for some, not all, but like for some black women to exist in society. And she's totally valid in what she's saying. She's like, at the workplace, I'm the only girl who's dark skinned and I'm overweight and I feel like guys here don't like me. And I'm just like, I'm trying to get my bag. Why is she telling me this? Oh, because some people see me as their friend to the point where they just trauma dump on me. And it made me feel guilty. No one should make you feel guilty, but I'm too empathetic where I'm just like, why would you say this to me? And it just hit me. Like, I can't have anybody feeling this way. I can't control it though. But with my new channel, the people there are in a place where they're like working, or they're just realistic about any sort of relationship in their life. It just seems healthier.
For many, she was deemed relatable purely because she was black, and literally no other reason aside from that. And I think for Kelly, at least, it may have started to feel like this was all she really represented and all she was worth, especially when she was featured as a YouTube creator via this YouTube branding that they do, which is very identity political, of like representing particular minorities, and Kelly was one of these representatives. People were quite upset about this because of the revelations which they found out about her being right-leaning, about being conservative, about her being quite anti-woke, yet still taking opportunities and taking advantage of the fact when, well, it served her brand, for instance, at least according to them. And I think that crucially, online at least, being a black woman means a few things. I have noticed this not just with myself as a black woman, but with other black female content creators, that there's definitely this perspective that as a black woman, you are only allowed to be so successful. And if you overstep that approved boundary of approved success, then people start to criticize you, start to call you out, don't like you, that sort of thing. It has definitely been noticeable to me that Kelly appears very comfortable being a quote-unquote black woman without fitting into the approved boundaries, the expectations and norms of being a black woman. And I would say that this most definitely proved to make some in her audience, and I would say that of that some, a portion of them were black, quite uncomfortable.
I will bring up this kind of unpopular opinion. This is how I feel. Black channels can feel redundant. Say it loud, I am black and I'm proud. And I am honest, and this is the honest tea. There are only so many hair and makeup videos I can watch until I get bored. White people get clicked on more often. They just do. It is a fact. But keeping their interest after clicking is a skill. And I have that skill. Almost every video I make has a uniqueness to it, and my watch time is very high because of this. I have to work twice as hard as my white counterparts to maintain interest on my channel. Once I get past your first impression and whatever preconceived thoughts you had about me from that little thumbnail, and you watch all of my videos, you get hooked. You're hooked, aren't you? And then you join the Stampede. Why? Because people will watch knowledgeable people no matter what their ethnicity is. There really is no reason why I can't be successful on YouTube and have over 1 million subscribers. I just have to work twice as hard as other girls on here because, you know, I have to work double time to stand out when you don't look like the classic YouTube sensation.
Accusations of being whitewashed or a Candace Owens litter the forums when it comes to Kelly Stamps at the moment. And I'd say that what made it and what continues to make it even worse is that Kelly doesn't care, or at least she's very convincing at presenting herself and presenting an image of herself not caring at all. Kelly now was no longer, and it would appear is no longer, afraid of not conforming to or fitting into the group.
I understand why I get comments like, why do you do snowboarding? Why are you in Bozeman, Montana? Girl, we're not there. I'm like, that's the point. It's fun. Think of it this way. What if you just show up? I don't know, like, where do they not have Asian men? Miami. What if 10,000...
I've literally never been to Miami in my life, so...
There's no reason to go. It's just too hot. Like, I know one guy there, and he's Korean. He's like, I've never seen another Korean man here. And I said, do you feel uncomfortable? He's like, no. People here are actually very kind to me. I'm like, so what if we just all went to these places and just kind of enjoyed our peace, just talk to people and don't expect them to attack us? But I get attacked for even saying that. It's like, well, why are you trying to bond with the enemy? I'm like, they're not my enemy. I'm just a girl from LA who likes to ice skate.
Being different is not something that makes her uncomfortable. And I think it's quite important that we talk about this difference and what that means, and also maybe critique it a bit. Anti-woke and anti-vax. As I said, Kelly Stamps is consuming content that is anti-woke and is herself anti-woke.
People like to come at me and be like, well, creative and Christian is an oxymoron because technically you can't really do both. I'm like, you can, but in my case, clearly I've chosen to just mind my business and be creative in a different way because unfortunately Hollywood has become, in fact, Hollyweird. We're way past the point of return.
I think real television died off in like maybe 2010 after Desperate Housewives. Hi.
She is definitely a believer of a kind of platonic idea of Christian womanhood that is being diminished by people trying to be us and competing. I think a lot of Kelly's perspectives on modern wokeness are very much informed from her personal experiences of experiencing racism and passive aggressive behavior and microaggressions from what can be called allies, especially after excelling past them. And I do have to say, I completely believe that this is viable.
The point is that some of these people will look at you like, how dare she take up the space? How dare this black girl be in the same room as me? How dare you be at this, I don't know, let's say country club? Wow, why are you in Chanel? That's happened to me before here in California. How they don't say it, but you just know. Wow. They don't like you in their space because I'm not supposed to. They're supposed to be there their whole lives. But unfortunately for them, lots of, again, so-called minorities, there's nothing minor about our existence. A lot of minorities are stepping up and we're like, we ain't victims, leave us alone, shut up. We're educated, oh my goodness, we're smart. We can make our own decisions. We all don't think this way, okay? Whatever.
Some allies, time and again, show their true colors and their true allegiance eventually. A black woman excelling, especially in areas of life or in careers that are not typical or are not condoned, that importantly undermine or conflict with the ideological belief that all black people are systemically disadvantaged and cannot thrive in modern society. And also, as is the case with Kelly, excelling on their own without taking the rest of the race along with them cannot be tolerated. And you know what, Kelly? Preach. A lot of people really cannot deal with a black woman not being what they think a black woman should be. And in my experience, at least, it is oftentimes not all, definitely not all, but some black men who are the ones who cannot handle it, especially when you as a black woman don't think like them and are not willing to boost their already massive egos. You see how Kelly Stamps is a perfect example of how we as black people, and even if we're just talking about African Americans, how black people are all different. I think with all of us, it would be completely fine if we all accepted difference rather than trying to validate our own identity, trying to undermine our own insecurities in our own identities by explicitly invalidating difference, which is inevitable. Particular segments of the online black community literally say that because they are on the right side of history in their opinion, that they are perfectly valid and entitled to bully people into submission. Just because we have the same skin tone, it will never mean and should never mean that we have to think the same and do the same. And I think, interestingly, Kelly Stamps is a perfect example of this. However, we are not all praise and no critique on this channel. So let's get back to Kelly's anti-wokeness. I do think that Kelly thinks that she is a bit more knowledgeable in wokeness than she actually is.
I'm educated.
Her definition of what she perceives wokeness to mean is lacking. She simply calls it chaos.
Somebody asked me, I'm a Christian, but woke. What is woke to you? Thank you, Dolly, for asking. This is a very good question. I said this on a video titled, How It Feels to Be Christian in a Woke World. And I explained, there's a difference because I'm educated. Woke had a very different meaning, like 20 years ago, before we were born. Woke just meant you are literally awake to the systemic racism, sexism, whatever isms out there. You're awake. But woke now has become just chaos. That's it, chaos. So that should clear up my opinion of woke. Like, it's very obvious what woke means today.
No, that cleared up nothing. Nothing was said. What does chaos even mean? My room is chaos, but I do not associate any negative connotations to calling my room chaos. It's just chaos, okay? It actually isn't obvious to a lot of people, and I'd say to most people, what woke means today. It really isn't. It has been so heavily politicized by so many different interest groups that there really is no consensus or understanding of what the word actually etymologically means for many. And Kelly herself inadvertently is actually the perfect example of this. dangerous. For example, the co-option of woke by Ron DeSantis has turned it into a pejorative, somewhat derogatory term. Ron DeSantis' administration defines modern wokeness as the belief that there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them. And this modern definition of woke given by the DeSantis administration is nearly word for word the definition of woke that Kelly gives for the meaning of woke historically.
There are reasons why certain groups are stuck in a place. You know, you can't ignore that. Like, that being woke used to mean just being aware of situations. Like, there's a reason why, I don't know, the person down the street is living, truly probably, this is Miami, living like 10 people to, you know, a 2-bedroom apartment, and why they can't just get up tomorrow and get out of it. Like, there are reasons, right? We're not stupid here. I'm not, at least.
So DeSantis' modern definition of woke actually conflicts with Kelly's modern definition of woke because it is in fact the historical definition of woke, which Kelly accepts as the real definition of woke. That is, according to her, not the modern definition of woke, which according to DeSantis is in fact the modern definition of woke. So I'm confusion.
So I am confusion.
She goes further to call modern wokeness pure mental illness.
Right now, it is just pure mental illness. That is it. That is it.
Again, this really says nothing aside from rather generically and I would say misleadingly demonizing mental illness, but you do you, I guess. I would say, and of course I'm sure that Kelly would completely disagree with me, that she really doesn't know what woke is. As somebody who is religious but more so theological, according to many now since I've left the church, I would say that some religious folk, I will not say all, but some religious folk really do have a tendency to, instead of acknowledging that they don't actually know something, will defer to God and God's authority in order to make their lack of knowledge appear like actual genuine knowledge. Deflecting to God, who is seemingly all-knowing, makes it very easy for individuals to then at least feel or present themselves as being themselves all-knowing. And this is precisely what Kelly does when it comes to wokeness. At Dolly351 says in Kelly Stamp's comment section, "I'm a Christian but woke. What is woke to you?" Kelly responds, "True followers of Christ don't bend for the world. We live for him and not our peers." You know when you've said something that you think sounds profound, but you've actually said nothing? And Kelly, absolutely no shame, but you did get a boob job. And the only reason I bring this up is because of what you have just said about the importance of living for him and not our peers, of not bending for the world. You got a boob job for, in my opinion, very understandable and justifiable reasons. You got a boob job for you, for your self-esteem. You got a boob job because of modern society and because you partake in modern society, whether you like it or not. You did not get a boob job for Christ. People bend for the world and bend for their peers. That is just a prerequisite of being in modern society. I wear a wig because the world treats me better, and you got implants because I'm sure the world treats you better, and self-confidence spawns from that. My point here is that Kelly cares about how she looks. She cares about enhancing her physical appearance. She cares about buying expensive clothes and things and staying in fashion, all because she bends for the world. And that is completely fine. And importantly, it is completely human. Does that make Kelly or anybody else not a true follower of Christ? In my opinion, I don't think it does. That is, I think you are a true follower of Christ if you get implants or if you bend to your peers and to social pressures and yada yada yada. I'm not a judger. So in the same vein, why should somebody giving to Caesar's what is deemed Caesar's not make them a true follower of Christ? Sadly, you, that is Kelly, is not giving me an actual definition here or an actual answer. For somebody who prides herself on being an independent thinker, who isn't falling prey to the modern woke agenda, I'm not getting much thought beyond fear-mongering and a sort of if you know you know vibe when you actually don't seem to know. At Dolly351 responds, "I agree, but I'm still woke. you still didn't answer my question. What is woke and how is it bad and against Christianity? Look, I'm Christian but not conservative. Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice. Isaiah 1 verse 17. You not bending your values for the world is completely fine and valid, but it is also possible, as Dolly 351 states, to be Christian and woke. I'm also curious as to how Kelly Stamps, as an individual who is clearly influenced by reactionary media in the same way that seemingly the woke are influenced by reactionary media and by our modern culture, is now an authority on what constitutes true Christianity and what doesn't. I know that it may feel for a lot of people that they are being forced to believe delusions nowadays, but in actual fact, absolutely nobody is being forced to believe delusions. People calling you a transphobe or a bigot because you have different opinions to them is, yes, of course, it is horrible, it is unfair, and it is unpleasant. Especially when they come for your career, when you have those different opinions, which should never be condoned and should never be allowed. But with all that being said, you have not been forced to believe delusions. That is just another culture war gimmick that is just that. A gimmick. Considering that on Kelly's second channel, she is openly expressing her views and perspectives with little to no pushback. I think what Kelly's real reckoning is that she doesn't feel as seen in her true identity at such a high level of success as she was in her peak and seemingly more liberal pandemic identity on her main channel. That is unfair and I'm sure quite hard to come to terms with, but the cultural mood is shifting, as it always is. There are niches like the one that she has clearly carved out for herself on her second channel that is clearly experiencing success. And I honestly wouldn't say that this would be the case even 3 years ago. Kelly wanted a new God-fearing audience, and she has one, and that is great, and is proof that she and her audience are most definitely not being forced to believe delusions against their will.
None of you guys matter at the end of the day when it comes to like the judgment time to go to heaven or not.
Kelly is also friends with Amir Odom, the new darling of the online anti-woke right, so she's clearly supported, connected, and validated in her belief systems. But back to the critique. I've definitely noticed that Kelly likes to present herself as being educated and unbiased, and will simultaneously make references to that via expressing how she watches the likes of Brett Cooper. I think many anti-woke rhetoricians and many who are anti-woke, like Kelly, really have the same mindset, underlying at least, or foundational mindset that I see among red pillars. That is, they believe that they're uncovering the actual truth that modern feminists or the woke are trying to hide. Everybody is being indoctrinated and culture is regressing and becoming degenerate. Kelly even said something that red pillars say all the time, which is, and I quote, "Very few will want to practice my life-changing habits."
That's why you need an actual pastor, not me. Women don't preach. Okay, I said what I said. You need an actual pastor to read the gospel to you.
And they all, like Kelly, look back to an idealized, nostalgic time in history, which, if you actually read history books in all their complexity, would show you that all human history, irrespective of culture, is pretty much degenerate, brutal, riddled in conspiracy, violence, and sin. I think it's difficult for a lot of people to come to terms with the fact that at literally no point in history has anybody ever cared about the well-being of the children, unless it's to serve the political agenda of the adults. And I think this is quite difficult for a lot of people to accept, especially I would say just based on personal experience, a lot of religious people to accept. I think we all like to believe that we are doing good, and I think everybody, even when they are doing the most profound and most obvious evil and wrong and bad, believes that they are doing good. There's this idea that Kelly expresses in some of her videos that since 2020, things have been off, that there's been a sort of cultural shift, and that especially the faithful or true Christians are feeling this difference. And of course, I completely validate this. I completely, if you feel like this, then that's absolutely your prerogative and your experience, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I think it's important to note that this is very much something that many groups, many communities, many people, and many individuals throughout history have felt. There is always a shift, there's always a moment, there's always something that's culturally off, there is always something wrong, there is always a time to idealize, to be nostalgic over. That is nothing new. That is ultimately really at the essence of the human experience, irrespective of time and period. Just like Kelly believed that the rapture was happening in around 2020, that is the second coming of Christ, many a Christian has believed this throughout history.
I think a lot of people are realizing, ooh, there's something off right now. Whether it's, Christianity related or not, there's something off. You can feel it. Ever since 2020, like I said in my other video, where I said nothing feels real anymore since 2020, something changed. I don't know what it is. I can't put a finger on it. At one point, I genuinely thought Jesus was coming back. I don't know.
I'm going to have to use a lot of euphemisms in this section in order to get around YouTube's rules and regulations and bureaucracy on this, so forgive me in advance. Sadly, Kelly also privated this video recently. She's privated a few videos recently. It's as if she knows that I'm making a video about her. But basically, all you really need to know is that Kelly is anti-vax. And this is a very interesting conversation, and I do like to have this conversation mainly because people don't really like what I have to say about this when I have expressed my opinions, at least to my friends and to associates and acquaintances. But I'll give it a go because I think it's important. And again, I think Kelly is a really good example of this and what I'm trying to demonstrate. First, we need to note that Kelly is a self-professed educated person. And I need the emphasis to be on the educated here. I think it's very, very important. Now, in my humble opinion, a person who is educated is not going to, at least 9 out of 10 times, be anti-vax.
If you're not vaccinated, don't hang out with me.
There is not just overwhelming evidence historically, but also presently of the effectiveness of vaccines. Now, I get it. The corporatization of modern medicine really does need to be critiqued, I think, by everybody because it is incredibly harmful, not just to medicine, but I think especially to people, to patients who have to take that medicine and to our very psyche and our paranoia around what we are putting into our bodies, into our society. Basically, modern medicine needs to do a hell of a lot better in communicating to people who think that they know everything because they spend all their time on the internet and know how to read WebMD. The underlying hysteria surrounding Vid-19 vaccines is largely down not to people being educated or uneducated, but down to people being on social media. And I think if you couple that with the growing politicization of vaccines and medicine, it is absolutely no wonder why people are so distrusting and are so paranoid around expertise and authority. The US military's secret anti-vax campaign in the Philippines for geopolitical reasons against China is a really good example of how politicized saving lives is and why it's so hard to trust expertise and, as I said, authority when that power is so cruelly exploited for gain, either financially or politically. However, I do want to hold educated people to some account on this. An educated person would know that across the world, the mortality rates for people who were vaccinated relative to those who were unvaccinated at the time of their demise is quite literally an objective fact that vaccines work and are very, very important. Among the survivors from intensive care units, 93.0% were vaccinated compared to 7.0% unvaccinated. We found vaccination against Vid-19 reduces the rate of demise irrespective of comorbidities or severity of disease. That was in Bangladesh and has really shown itself to be universally the case across the world in both the developed and less developed world. So I don't think that this is really an issue of not being educated. I think that this is really an issue, as I said, of social media and also of confirmation bias. Hot take, but I really don't think that the vast majority of anti-vaxxers are actually just stupid people, okay? I really don't think that they're stupid. It really isn't stupid to be mistrusting of governments, and it really is not stupid to be mistrusting of the misinformation that is rotting our sanity from day to day. I do notice, for instance, that in Kelly's videos, she says that she's smart or that she is educated, and I do think that there is a distinction between between the two. I definitely think that Kelly is smart. I don't think she's as smart as she thinks she is, but of course, that is not a Kelly problem. That is everybody in the world. There is no human being on earth who doesn't think that they are smarter than they actually are. That's a bit nonsensical. We all think that we're smarter than we actually are. So I'm not holding that against her at all. But I do think that she is smart. I don't think that she is, quote unquote, educated when it comes to at least this topic. For instance, I recently read a story about a health aide who was anti-vax and gave her reasons and explanations for not taking the vaccine. And mind you, as I said, she was a health aide, she was an essential worker, and even though she was afraid of contracting the virus, she chose not to take the vaccine. Skeptical of the flu vaccine as well, she assumed that the development of the virus vaccines had been rushed and that it was too soon to know if they were safe. Now, that is a pretty reasonable psychological response. It's arguably smart from her perspective and her personal history. And I think that's really important to consider. I, that is the health aide that we're talking about, didn't know if they were testing all the poor people before they gave it to the rich people, she said, adding that as a black woman, she had particular concerns about the vaccines, given the history of medical experimentation on black Americans. Again, this is perfectly understandable and really reasonable from her perspective based on her identity, on who she is, on her personal history. But what I do think is important is this, and this is where I think confirmation bias comes into it. This black American health aide decided to take the vaccine after she contracted the virus and experienced all of the symptoms, and especially really experienced how it impacted her life, her social life, and her ability to be with her partner. I think oftentimes something has to happen to us personally before we are actually willing to address our confirmation bias. People often only start advocating for something when it has affected their lives personally, when it disrupts everything they thought they knew. And I really don't think that this is a matter of being intelligent or not. I think this is a matter of being human or not, and we are all human. With Kelly Stamps specifically, and the whole being anti-vax, I don't really know if it's a religious thing, you know, the blood of Jesus is my vaccine. I saw one, I'm invincible because Jesus is on my side. Or there are definitely some denominations and some segments within denominations that perceive the likes of mass viruses and mass illness as being his will. I don't know, I'm just thinking of the rationale of a modern Christian who is educated and who is clearly smart being anti-vax. This was a tricky little web of reasoning to try and draw in my mind when it came to Kelly Stamps being anti-vax. Like, I do want to emphasize that Kelly really is not stupid. She is smart. As I said, think that she thinks that she's a bit smarter than she is, but still she is smart. She also doesn't see everything in black and white. She recognizes that there are systemic inequalities that affect, for instance, communities like the black community. I guess, as I said, there are some religious denominations that may argue that it was just his will that 1.1 million Americans perished because of a virus, but I cannot imagine, and I really do not see many arguments not being met with the very effective counter-argument that surely we as humans should use our free will and thus our ability to understand medicine and vaccines and such to alleviate the suffering of our fellow human beings, to do unto our neighbors as we would have them do unto us, thus take a vaccine in order to, you know, live by that. I don't know. Anyway, the only hypothesis that I could really put forward in relation to Kelly being anti-vax, because as I said, the video is now private, so I can't actually get to the nitty-gritty of it, so I'm going with what I just think, just based on the premise of being anti-vax, is from a book that I read a while ago, which is titled The Intelligence Trap: Why Smart People Do Dumb Things. That is the title of the book. I'm sorry, that is a very savage title. I sense that Kelly, just based on all of her, especially religious videos that I have watched, is a closure-oriented person. And this is very common for a lot of especially religious individuals. A closure-oriented person is quite literally that. They seek closure. And I think this is why it is so effective and so pertaining to individuals who are religious. God, for instance, is always the answer. there's your closure. God is the closure. And because God is always the answer for you as an individual, God is also always the answer for society. God is the beginning, He is the middle, and He is the end. Now, this obviously isn't easy to understand, hence why people read scripture, but it is very easy to implement. At least verbally. It's very personal. There's a Bible to consult. There's a God to consult through prayer. And on the other hand, there's a complex world with complex problems that are impersonal. And in this complex world, it is not only virtually impossible to implement solutions that will be universally applicable and recognizable, it is also incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to actually really understand those problems, to actually understand those complexities, let alone any solutions, if there are any. Everybody thinks that they have solutions for the world. And in actual fact, I would very strongly argue, nobody does. My solution will always look like a problem to you, and vice versa. It really is not as simple as Kelly says. The thing is, confirmation bias is behind all of our decisions to some extent. Those of us who chose to take the vaccine didn't read every study. We didn't follow data sets year on year. We didn't know the science nor the history behind these vaccines. Most people, myself most definitely included, took the vaccine because of confirmation bias to at least some extent. And it's been very interesting and insightful to me to see people who were previously anti-vax and then decided to take the vaccine, that almost all of them, I would say 99.9% of them, changed their minds because of something that personally happened to them, because they either contracted the virus and experienced these side effects, or more importantly, they knew somebody who contracted the virus and sadly didn't make it. Basically, their personal lives were rocked by something that was previously impersonal suddenly becoming personal, because something that happened over there suddenly happened right over here. And I think this just proves that it really takes a lot for us to have our beliefs and our belief systems challenged, and to importantly change those belief systems. A lot of people have to have a gay child who they've loved and adored before they actually critically engage with their confirmation bias, with their prejudice, with their beliefs and their values. And just as the stories of so many young people who have lost contact or been estranged from their families demonstrates, not even this is enough. And I think what a lot of people have to realize and have to appreciate, even though I don't think a lot of people who are at least anti-vax do, because obviously confirmation bias means that we look for information that confirms our bias already, is that the real and only reason why life has gone back to normal, why Kelly is able to go to Italy, why Kelly is able to travel and live a fruitful and healthy life, is because of the direct consequences of the success of the vaccine. And that is undeniable if you look for real unbiased information about it. I just thought talking about Kelly being anti-vax was quite important, because this, at least on the forums, was something that people were really concerned about and had a lot to say about, especially about Kelly and about their experiences personally with anti-vaxxers and their experience with the vaccine, and how this really influenced their perspective on Kelly stamps. And ultimately, it's quite important, I think, in answering the question, what happened to Kelly stamps? But anyway, I wish Kelly and all of you well, irrespective of whether you are vaccinated or not. I do personally, just based on everything, sincerely hope that you are vaccinated for your own well-being. Blessings and riches to all, really, irrespective of views, politics, whatnot. I hope that we all stay healthy and alive.
I halted my own income, I halted everything, and now I got the happy ending that I always wanted, and God basically sent me the man of my dreams.
It's telling to me that when Kelly was liked, the idea of calling her or associating her with the rather derogatory trope of the Oreo was condemned. But now that her socio-political allegiance is known, associating her with this trope and with derogatory terms, and in some cases quite racist terms and references, is completely okay now. I also think it's really interesting that most of Kelly's audience really didn't seem to know that she was Christian, and so as a result, them not knowing meant that that didn't matter. But then when people found out, it did matter. I think it's interesting social commentary on how conditional authenticity is, and also how we as consumers of content sometimes claim to want authenticity when maybe that isn't actually the case. Kelly's initial branding was all about wanting to be rich, wanting to retire early, not dreaming of labor. It's very noticeable to me that when she wanted that life and was striving for that life, that was completely tolerable and palatable content. However, when she achieved all of that which she was wanting and striving for, I think the idea of a 25-year-old black woman becoming a millionaire, and even worse, not being ashamed of it and giving most, if not all, of the credit not to her audience but to God and herself, was too much for most. And I think understandably so.
I have made about $950,000 as a content creator over the past 4 years. This blows my mind, by the way. I officially am doing better than my parents.
I feel like I will always be provided for. Like, God always provides. So that's why I'm not concerned about money or anything like that. Because no offense, I mean this kindly, none of you guys matter at the end of the day.
I was just doing what made me happy in the moment, which I thought was overworking myself, making money, and letting managers run my life. A lot of sketchy stuff happened, which maybe I'll talk about later. Like, they were telling me what to do, what to say, and telling me don't talk about your faith, and trying to get me to repost some stuff, if you know what I mean, that didn't really align with God. And that's when people were like speculating, is Kelly Stamps Republican? I'm like, no babe, I'm just cute. I love Jesus more than you. I don't know. So no offense. I intentionally reduced my own income and started this new channel as a hobby. And it was a huge risk, as was alienating my audience, like I said.
I do think the credit that Kelly gives to God, and especially to herself, over that of the audience who, at least to some extent, I guess, quote unquote, made her, is definitely enough to alienate a lot of people from you. That's just undeniable. I'm so sorry. So I guess in all of this, it is no wonder to me why Kelly would gravitate toward the people and the communities who validate and affirm her personally, who humanize her and don't shame her for not being the person that they want her to be. And this is really what we all do. I'm not going to be around people who don't validate me or don't make me feel good, who shame me for everything that I allegedly do wrong or seemingly do wrong according to them. I want to feel comfortable in my beliefs and in my existence, and inevitably I'm going to be around people who make me feel comfortable in who I am, as I am. For instance, Kelly relays how it was the Christian YouTubers and influencers who were the ones that called her and actually cared about her personal loss back in 2020. Whereas, shall we call them the rather sanctimonious virtue signaling YouTubers who didn't care and who only cared to contact her and to associate with her or to not associate with her because she wasn't being a good enough black person during everything that was happening in 2020.
And when I started talking to like some of my friends, my former friends in New York about this, the people who only came up to me because I blew up and because I was good for their channel, it's very transactional. I took part in it too, you know, the clout chasing and just trying to like social climb. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear about it. None of them cared when I said, oh, my dad passed away. They were just like, you know, I'm putting a damper on the mood. But the people who did call were the YouTubers, like my new friends now, who happened to all be, they just happen to be Christian. And I'm like, why is that? Because they pray with me, they sit down with me, and I don't need an audience to all pray with me. Yeah. But I would rather inspire people to just live a life maybe a little bit more like Christ, because I try to do that all the time. You just didn't know because I didn't always talk about it in the past, because as a people pleaser, I don't want to make people uncomfortable.
I really do sympathize with Kelly on this, that I cannot imagine what that must have felt like, especially if you think you know people. And then, yes, I do think, as I said, I think it should make, I think, people really question their priorities when it comes to the personal and the political. But as I said, we are not all about praise on this channel. Critique is very important to effective analysis. What I've noticed with a lot of Kelly's branding, both her previous branding and her branding now, is that she very much likes to present herself as not being a victim. However, it can definitely come across as if she feels herself to be a victim of her own success, of her own uniqueness, and a perception that she is an independent thinker who is perpetually misunderstood and is a subject of envy by many.
But your value as a human doesn't come from how many degrees you have, how much money you make, the clothes you're wearing. fitting in with other people, fitting in with the world. In my opinion, it comes from, just God. Like, you have this gift, and I just think it's a waste of your life to spend it trying to prove something to other people. Like, if I cared what other people thought, I wouldn't make a second channel just ripping this whole idea apart.
And I find this victimhood complex that I do think Kelly has very interesting, because it isn't the conventional victim from below, but rather a kind of victim from above.
Also, I didn't want to bring this up into it, but I think a lot of the extra animosity towards me comes from the fact I'm a black woman. And my entire life I've had this same problem, which is that I notice there's no other ethnic or racial group of people who are so quick to tear each other down besides black people. The really successful people that I know who happen to be black all end up having very few black friends, because they end up not exactly trying to find white friends, but they find people who just uplift and support them. And more often than not, I mean, look at social media, look at TV. You don't have to argue with your mom. Don't argue with me. More often than not, we're the quickest to tear each other down. I don't know why. Not me. I don't do that.
Kelly Stamps most definitely fits this idea of a victim from above. She has, in her own words, said that her existence is the ultimate protest. She does definitely hold a sort of belief that people just can't handle her existence or can't handle who she is, that she is so countercultural that it's almost unbearable for some, which makes her an outcast and an outsider. I think it can definitely be argued that a lot of people who think counterculturally and who think in a different bubble perceive themselves to be independent thinkers or to be outcasts and outsiders, when in fact they're just thinking differently from what is the dominant cultural bubble. And that's completely fine, but I really do caution at believing that individual independent thinking is equivalent to just being countercultural or thinking counterculturally. In fact, I would just really like to reiterate from my perspective as somebody who does consider herself to be relatively woke, even though I know a lot of people would disagree, most anti-woke content and moral panicking is merely the opposing side of a very profitable, sanctimonious culture war. This culture war is making a lot of Kelly Stamps faves and her friends a lot of money and giving them a great ego boost, which is fine. Content is king, all of that. But I think it's important to recognize that when we engage with this content, especially when we engage critically with it, or we are trying to present ourselves as being critical thinkers, as Kelly most definitely does present herself as being. The cultural persecution of Christianity, and as herself as a Christian content creator, is definitely an underlying theme of Kelly's new content. Kelly Stamps does often come across now as being a sort of religious crusader who is sort of stuck in a world not of her making, and inevitably as a result will never truly fit in.
Guys, just form a relationship with God. That's all I'm begging. I'm begging. I feel like I can be the sound of this generation, the voice, of this generation. I need food. I genuinely want what's best for my generation, and I just don't know if it's possible to reverse the damage that has been done. But I'm hoping with this video, I can encourage you, stay away from woke churches. Stop it and make a choice. Stand in your truth. If you don't want to be Christian, that's completely fine. I still love you. Here, you could take Doge. I still love you. He gives you a hug too. But you can't be Christian and woke. You can't. Stop it. Stop pretending. Stop hurting Jesus' feelings. Stop hurting my feelings too. Bye.
The crusader aspect of it is most definitely present in Kelly's belief that she knows and is a true Christian relative to other denominations, and relative especially to a lot of modern churches who are modernizing and are getting better PR teams. As I showed, Kelly does this by distinguishing between woke Christians and true Christians like herself. I mean, in the same way that there are some Christian denominations and individuals who believe that God purposely created homosexuals in order to test humanity, in order to especially test his most devout followers to see if they could lead a life of celibacy and struggle in pursuit of their higher purpose. Has anybody ever thought that maybe, just maybe, it was his will for the church, the modern church, to modernize, to become more progressive, considering that everything is ultimately his will? I mean, I personally still read my Bible Bible very frequently just because of how beautifully written my edition at least is. And the idea of struggle is sort of endemic to the human experience. It's endemic to the essence of most of what the Bible is saying to us, of most of what the stories and the books of the Bible are saying to us. And, I think modernity is a struggle for everybody, really for everybody. Everybody in modernity feels to an extent like somewhat of an outcast, feels like they are misunderstood, that they are not understood or taken seriously. Struggle is key to everything underlying the human experience. It is constantly testing our wills, our morals. I think what is kind of clear and quite noticeable, especially now with social media, and I would say the social mediaification of Christianity and Christian influences, is that a lot of people believe that doing Christianity their way is equivalent to doing Christianity his way. And I most definitely do not think that Kelly Stamps is exempt from this kind of thinking. The argument for a lot of true Christians like Kelly goes that they are doing Christianity God's way. This argument has never been terribly convincing to me, especially because most of the people preaching true Christianity are, firstly, all from different denominations, so where's the unifying objective truth in all of that? And I think most importantly, it oftentimes feels like these true Christians like Kelly Stamps pick and choose what they want from modernity, whilst accusing other Christians of picking and choosing what they want from Christianity. For instance, the internet is clearly riddled in explicit content, in child abuse, in illegalities and sinfulness. And yet, the internet is clearly of value, of significance and benefit to the lifestyles, to the identities, to the careers of individual true Christians like Kelly Stamps or Garrett Neal, who are seemingly lost outcasts in modernity.
My point is, I haven't made a video because I can't honestly relate to Christianity as a group. I can't, because I feel like I'm that 1%.
Why are some Christians so judgmental? Seriously, like I get the ick. I get the ick sometimes when I try to participate in groups for too long outside of church. Why is that? Let's play the game of, am I the problem or are they? Okay, let's deal some cards here. All right, by the way, if you don't like the truth, you're not gonna like this channel.
I can't say that I'm always terribly convinced by this narrative. However, what I am convinced by a lot more so is this belief that Kelly has and that many modern Christians have, that modern culture and that our cultural climate really doesn't take the persecution of Christianity seriously. I think because of all the stereotypes surrounding being a Christian in a modern society, it's very difficult for this to be taken seriously by the wider society. In the same vein, I really don't think that the modern world, at least online, is quite ready to hear about the woes of high-earning influencers, especially when it comes to things like blight stalking. Socioeconomic inequalities is too heavily ingrained in our social fabric at the moment. And I would say that the internet is also far too morally divided into binaries. That is, the rich can't possibly have any problems because they're rich, and ultimately they're rich, so who cares? And yet, I do think that Kelly's response to this, to everything that she has gone through in the past few years, has made her very likable to me personally, and I think to many who have actually watched all of her old and her new content. It may seem from this video that I don't like Kelly, but I really do like her. I think that as a content creator, and at least what I see of her content, I do like what I see. I think what I like is that she is painfully authentic. And I think you know that somebody is being what I call painfully authentic when you really don't always agree with them, when you don't always like them, or you don't always like what they're doing. I also think you can see this sort of painful authenticity when you have a different relationship to a content creator or an influencer now relative to a few years back or some time back. Your relationship to them changes as they inevitably change, but you can still appreciate the content and the person. I do think that Kelly believes herself to be more tolerant than she actually is, yet it is clear to me that her growing lack of tolerance, like her no longer being nice and a people pleaser, is an understandable and valid reaction to people being intolerant of her difference. And that is so human that I can't actually even really be mad at that. It's perfectly understandable, really. I think it's very understandable just given the sort of religious communities and the religious, I guess, bubble that she is in, as well as the fact that she is a very popular public figure and everything that she's gone through as a result. And I would say, just to end on this more positive note, because it's nice to end on a positive note to things, I always think. I think one thing that I really do appreciate about Kelly's new, more religious, if not explicitly religious content is that A, she's not ashamed, or she is unashamedly a Christian content creator and is unashamedly making content about her reckoning with her faith and being a Christian. And B, she isn't afraid to call out Christian influences and what Christianity online sometimes, really, I would say sadly, is for many. That is, it's really refreshing to see somebody who isn't afraid to critique and call out their own community, to critique and to call out their own tribes people. I think it's important to note that she isn't just making content that is calling out the woke, but is also making content that is calling out and critiquing her own religious identity group. And that is very, very rare. At least on my algorithm and on my feed. I would definitely argue against the claim that I see on Reddit especially, that Kelly Stamps is just another black conservative like all the rest. Personally, I don't even know what that means. I think every black conservative that I've watched or engaged with on the internet is different to all the others. There's really not much that really, I think for me at least, when you look into their personal histories and why they have the views that they have, is really sort of a universal that you can just box them all into one corner and say, you're all the same, you're all garbage, you're all whatever. Basically, I think it's really important to reckon with the fact that we can't put anybody into a cookie cutter box of our making. And I think Kelly Stamps is a perfect example of this.
I love Jesus, Florida air, gender roles, yeah, not much to say. I'm just so glad that I never, ever fell for the trap again, not feminism. Feminism is the reason why I can set up my tripod right now and make a living and, you know, have my little checking account and vote and do all these other basic things. But a lot of us, we didn't ask to be born at this certain time frame. I mean, I'm black, so that would have been bad if I was born any earlier. So let's keep that there. I'm just saying, I love the fact that I truly support any woman's choice to choose how they want to live.
Now, whether or not I agree with her is, I think, irrelevant for the most part. It's just really refreshing to see somebody who is sort of proud in who they are and their identity, who isn't trying to convert you into their identity, but still gives you a really good window into it. At least from my perspective, I did not feel like I was being converted or was being told that I'm not a good enough human being. I did feel that I could watch most of her content. Some of it, of course, got a bit ranty, but I mean, isn't that with everybody? She definitely isn't lacking in introspection, especially when it comes to her own reality. And I think that is, again, something that for me makes her very likable. And you know, I watched all of her content and I didn't for the most part feel attacked or offended by anything that she was saying. Kelly, for instance, is aware that there are lots of reasons not to like Christians. She isn't oblivious, burying her head in the sand or pretending that modern Christianity in its many variants is hunky-dory in the current state of the United States or the world.
You're afraid that people, upon hearing you reference your faith, might decide to stop watching.
Yeah, because there's a lot of reasons to not like Christians. I live in the heart of it in Dallas currently, and they judged me. I had these funny shoes. They were like some brand like Golden Goose, something like that, and they had a rainbow on it. And this lady at church was like, "You ain't that LGBTQ," and I was like, "Oh no, ma'am." And she's like, and I'm like, why would you say that? What if someone wanted to come to church? I go, you know what? I want to learn about this thing Kelly Stamps is talking about.
And I do definitely think that something that doesn't come across nearly as readily as her self-assurance and self-confidence in herself is something that is sometimes littered in some of her videos, namely that she isn't an expert, that she doesn't know everything.
By the way, I'm looking at my video right now. I have several videos lined up. One of them is titled like, you know, my opinions on being a judgmental Christian, stuff like that. I just don't want to be labeled as like a Christian YouTuber, because obviously I am, but it's more like I have a relationship, a genuine relationship, I think, with Christ. So like, I just don't want that label of like
Christian YouTuber. Because guess what? I cuss a little. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying. And for some reason, when you're like labeled as a vegan YouTuber or a sustainability YouTuber, whatever it is, people expect you to like never mess up. So that's just me. I'm being honest. I'm saying, look, I'm an influencer YouTuber who happens to be Christian. I have truly influenced you all to do better things with your lives. That doesn't mean that I'm perfect at all. I just have perfect hair. That's it.
And importantly, that she is still very much learning. She does sometimes make reference to this, but definitely not as frequently, and I can understand why this is missing from a lot of people's current critique of Kelly Stamps, because it really doesn't scream as loudly as sort of the self-assurance, the self-confidence, all of that. And I do think, in concluding, it is very important to note that Kelly Stamps, in all of her self-confidence and all of her personal growth, in all her flaws and in her very interesting anti-vax approach, doesn't seem to have lost that, as I call it, painful authenticity, which I think originally made her so incredibly likable. I just think that that painful authenticity is being exhibited and presented to a very different world, to a very different zeitgeist, to a very different mood. And therefore, I think that authenticity is just a little bit different. And I think that's completely okay. I think statements and comments saying that Kelly Stamps has changed say a bit more about the person saying it than about Kelly herself. Like it or not, people change and people grow. And I think it's really important to remember that the way that people change and grow is most definitely, most of the time, not going to be in the ways that we want or that we expect. As I said, I really do think that Kelly Stamps, as I've said throughout this video, is a perfect example of a lot of things. But crucially, I think that she is a perfect example of this point. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate if you have gotten to this point. It really means so very much to me. Thank you also to Oreo for sponsoring this video, and thank you to all of you for supporting my content, which really gives me these opportunities, which I just, even a few months ago, I could have never believed. So thank you so very much. Please do let me know in the comments what you think about this topic, what you think about not just Kelly Stamps herself, but if you have been a viewer of hers, how you have processed this transformation of Kelly into the woman that she is today as a public figure, that is. What do you think about painful authenticity, or about the relationship between influencers and their audiences, and how that translates? Who is more responsible for that relationship? I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts and opinions on that. Thank you also to my patrons, and also I just want to plug in my Instagram. I have an Instagram now and I'm trying to post there a bit more. I cannot wait to see you there. Thank you as always, and I'll see all of you very soon in the next one.